Oh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. And of course, before we get started, a special shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video. You already know, but for a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. The Mets have another wild back-to-back game, back and forth game, I should say, on back-to-back days with the Atlanta Braves as they managed to split the 4-game series. And look, like I said the other day, the wins and the losses, the record, it doesn't matter anymore for 2026. So we're not going to dive into these games the same way we would as if we are analyzing a team that is trying to make the playoffs, a team that is trying to win a World Series. We're going to look at these games from a little bit more of a bird's eye view. We're going to look at these games in a way where the record does not matter. The wins do not matter. This was a good win. It was a fun win. It was a wild win. It is the kind of win that in a regular season should be encouraging. In a season where the Mets aren't playing 15 games under 500 or 14, whatever they are now, it would be encouraging because the team did not give up. The team did not roll over. The team fought back through adversity. Also, the team showed a little bit of weakness in some spots in the bullpen where they coughed the lead back up after the dramatics. It seemed like Soto was going to win the game for him, and then all of a sudden, it's not meant to be. There's just so much happening in these games. There's so much drama, but that's what sports is about, right? So the game wasn't perfect by any stretch. The Mets didn't play this crisp, beautiful game from start to finish because, again, they weren't able to hold the lead that they got late when their bullpen has been such a strength. And obviously that would be a problem in a season where you're hoping the Mets can make the playoffs and win the World Series or whatever the expectations may be. But this is also a game that good teams win. If you're sitting there and you're rooting for your team, this is a game that you want to watch and you want to see them overcome the adversity. You want to see them fight through it. You want to see them not roll over, but it's a bit too little, too late. And if it feels like that, and that feels like sour grapes, and that feels like a bit of what could have been, I understand that. Because a game like this, ultimately, it really doesn't matter. I've said it on this show the entire time. I'd like to see the Mets go on a little bit of a run sometime this summer, whether this month or next month, where they have a really good month or a really good stretch of baseball in them, regardless of what it means for the record in 2026. Because I don't want to sit through an entire season of 2 bad games, 3 good games, 4 bad games, 2 good games, 1 bad game. I just don't want to ping pong for the entire season. I don't want to do it. And also, I do think that even though the record doesn't matter, we talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show. I don't think any of us want to sit through a team that's going to win or going to lose close to 100 games. And for the Mets to go on a little bit of a win streak at some point, regardless of if they could make the playoffs, it would be important to not go near the 100 loss mark, a mark that the Mets have only done 6 times in their existence, 5 of which came in the first decade of their existence, and they haven't done it since 1993, which is not a Mets team you want to be compared to. So, I think it's important for a couple different reasons. It was a good win. It was a fun win. It was a wild game. Soto came through clutch, and that's what I wanted to talk about really quickly. Some of the positives from this game. First of all, Freddie Peralta, not perfect, but bounced back really, really strongly. He also gutted his way through that game after throwing a ton of pitches, really just tried to, stay in this game, really tried to give the Mets as much as he possibly could in terms of innings, in terms of pitch count. And when you consider how badly he has blown up in some spots, it was nice to see him stay in and give the Mets something where it's not a complete and utter collapse. Because again, the biggest part of the biggest issue with Freddie Peralta's season is when he's been good, he's been baseline fine. And when he's been terrible, he's been unpitchably terrible. I mean, he's made sure that the Mets could not be in a game almost as if he was pitching, as with ulterior motives. He's pitching for the other side. That's how bad he's been in his blow-up games. This game was not great, but it was not this complete and utter blow up. And look, they're reporting now, whether you listen to Jeff Passan or Will Salmon, I think Jeff Passan had it where Peralta's 90% likely to get traded. So like I said, after his last start, he's got a little run here. He's got about a month where he can show people that what's been going on with him is something he can work through and something he can put behind him so that the Mets can actually get good value for Freddie Peralta. And I think, again, he's a starting pitcher. Teams need starting pitching. He's cheap, very, very cheap. I mean, his deal is going to be worth a couple $1,000,000 when you prorate it after the trade were to happen. So he's going to fetch the Mets something. But if he can go on a nice little run here over the next month, he will increase his value. It's just how it works. It's just the nature of the business when you're talking about supply and demand, and there's a finite amount of players that you can trade and players that other teams can acquire, and there's a finite amount of time to do it in. So I think he's helping his value. I think he didn't do terrifically yesterday, but he helped his value certainly. Benj hits another home run. That's a positive. Benj just, man, we're going to get to September or October when the season is over. I'm going to look back and we're going to see Carson Benj and we're going to go, damn, this kid had one hell of a rookie year. Is he going to win rookie of the year? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not. Whatever. I don't care. But he is going to put together a very, very good rookie campaign. I think he's going to probably sit somewhere around maybe 18 home runs. It's not all about home runs, but this is a guy who a lot of people thought like, yeah, even if he gets really good, even if he grows into his body and all this stuff, like he'll have some power, but he's not going to be like a big power guy. And not that 18 home runs would be massive home run power, but I do think that trends in a direction where you could go up from there. And I think, a lot of people thought maybe his ceiling would be 18 or 20 home runs over the course of his career. Per season. But I think maybe he's got a little bit more in him than that. So it's nice to see. It's nice to see him just put up some power numbers because I think that was a part of his game where you could say, okay, let's just wait and see. You knew the offensive approach would be there. You knew the defense would be there. The arm would be there. But I think the power, a lot of people thought, well, let's just see. Let's just wait and see. So it's nice to see that he's already got 11 home runs to this point. Speaking of home runs, you got Juan Soto, with a huge clutch home run off of Iglesias in the ninth inning. I mean, you can't do it better than that. That's why he's here. That's what he's getting paid for. That's who he is. He's having a great season. But the one knock that a lot of Met fans had, probably unfairly, but there's a little bit of justification in there. The clutch numbers have been a little low. The runners in scoring position have been a little low compared to where they were at different points in his career, not just this season, but last year as well. The overall total numbers look spectacular. You can't take anything away from Juan Soto at all. But to see him come through in a huge spot against the closer, turn the game around with a 3-run home run, that's what Juan Soto is. That's who Juan Soto is. That's what the Mets need Juan Soto to be. So, lost season or not, you need your guys to be who they're supposed to be. And he did that just through the roof. So you got to tip your cap there. What an absolutely huge moment. Again, you'd like to have it come in a season that means more, in a game that means more. But sometimes you can't get to those without having the moment earlier either. You need to, I guess what I'm saying is if the criticism has been on Juan Soto that he hasn't had these moments, well, let him have one or two in games or in a season that's whatever. And now he can kind of relax because he's had them. And now, when the pressure is on, when you get to a 2027 season and those at-bats going to matter more, well, then maybe we'll see that version of Juan Soto. So great moment for him, big time moment for him. And then the other thing was the catcher's offense. Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens both contributed big time hits that led to this win. And I think that's really, really important because the Mets have a lot invested in these guys, either developmentally with Alvarez or the fact that they turned around and extended Luis Torrens. That's not incredibly rich contract. But what I mean is the Mets are clearly invested in these guys. And so they have a lot invested in them. And, Francisco Alvarez is another guy who gets a lot of unnecessary hate because of how highly touted he was as a prospect. And I understand he hasn't lived up to that moniker exactly. But if you look at his numbers, he's been good. And we've talked about it before on this show. He gets lumped in with Beatty and Vientos, and there is a difference between underperforming and unperforming, not performing at all. And Alvarez might be underperforming for his career. Alvarez might be underperforming this year, but he is providing something. He is providing offensive value. Vientos, by and large, isn't, and Beatty, by and large, isn't. And so it's nice to see both of those guys chip in and contribute to a win. Speaking of catchers, this one did come from Will Salmon, who, again, for my money, is the best beat reporter the Mets have. And the Mets have a lot who are very good. Laura Albanese does a great job. Abby Mastracco does a great job. It looks like this new dude, Max Goodman, is doing a good job. But Will Salmon is so plugged in. I don't know if that's because he used to cover the Milwaukee Brewers, and so with David Stearns in the front office and some of David Stearns' people, maybe he's got, some really good connections. I don't know. But Will Salmon is excellent, and this comes from him where basically he said catching is thin around Major League Baseball, which it is, and the Mets could fetch a haul if they were to trade one of their catchers, either Francisco Alvarez or Luis Torrens, and those are the only people that the Mets have on their roster who are under team control beyond this year that they are considering trading from a position player standpoint. So basically, if you are a rental, so if you're Freddie Peralta or Brooks Raley or AJ Minter or, even Luis Robert Jr., whatever, like if you're a rental, the Mets are going to look to trade you pretty aggressively. If you don't have a ton of value, like a Mark Vientos or a Brett Beatty or maybe even a Kodai Senga, the Mets might look to trade you to shake up their own roster, but they're understanding that they're not going to get much back because you're basically sending off a lottery ticket to somebody. But as far as players who are under team control that have value, the Mets are really only interested. Like, they're not going to trade Carson Bench. They're not trading Juan Soto. They're not trading Francisco Lindor or AJ Ewing or Nola McLean or Christian Scott or whatever, right? But apparently they could consider, because of it being such a seller's market, dealing a catcher. And on the surface, it seems like an okay idea. But I'm here to tell you that I would not do it. I think the Mets catching tandem, and you saw it in the game last night, what they can do, how they can provide for you, how you can flex Francisco Alvarez out to a DH position if you needed to, and you can start Torrens, and you can take advantage of what they both have to offer, one being more offensively inclined, the other being more defensively inclined. I would not make a deal for a catcher if I'm the New York Mets, because catching is thin around the major leagues. Then where do you go? So for a lot of you, and I know you're down on Francisco Alvarez, let's say you want to get rid of him and you want to go with Luis Torrens. Okay, fine. Let's ignore the fact that, which a lot of you do, that Luis Torrens is not really a good hitter. He's a guy who gets hot in spots. He's a guy who does little things well where he can go the other way and some stuff like that, but he's not a great hitter. But let's ignore that for a second. If he is your primary catcher, now all of a sudden, who's your backup catcher? We going to Hayden Sanger again? We've already talked about him. He is an unplayable major league player. So you can't go that route. If you're going to make a deal for a catcher, especially if you're going to send out Francisco Alvarez, you really need to have a catcher of the future waiting in the wings. And again, catching is thin around Major League Baseball. You're not going to get somebody better than Francisco Alvarez on the free agent market, certainly. No one else is going to trade you a catcher that's better than him, because anybody who has a catcher that's better than him is not trading them. And a lot of other teams, believe it or not, don't have a catcher that's better than him. So now you have created a hole on your team where one didn't exist. The Mets have a good outfield with Soto, Ewing, and Benj. That is something moving forward they can be really, really happy with. And you have a guy like Morabito who can be your fourth outfielder, and you've got a couple guys who can flex out there if you need to. Jared Young will probably be on the roster next year. Ryan Clifford has spent some time playing the corner outfield, even though he's probably a first baseman DH, but you could put him out there in a pinch. So their outfield is set. Their catching seems set. Alvarez is 24 years old. Torrens just got a 2-year extension. I wouldn't be in such a hurry off of a season like this, with a team like this, with a roster like this, to create holes. Now, can you get something back that might be a king's ransom? Sure. And I guess if somebody bowls you over with a deal that you couldn't possibly say no to, maybe. But the problem is the Mets are a team that needs offense. Now, there are two players who we've talked about extensively who have been much maligned by this fan base, Bo Bichette and Francisco Alvarez, for different reasons. But again, if you look at what they have actually done on the field, if you look at the numbers, these are not players that the Mets should be looking to move on from anytime soon. Bo Bichette has been Bo Bichette for over a month. He had a bad 6 weeks. He had a bad adjustment phase to New York, and that sucks. And I said if we got to the end of the season and the Mets were terrible, nobody was going to care, and that's true. Even if Bo Bichette's numbers look good, I get that. But the Mets are in a position right now where if Bo Bichette opts out, I don't know where you go for offense. And if you trade Francisco Alvarez and Bo Bichette opts out, I don't know where the Mets go for offense. So then you're back to just Lindor and Soto. And Polanco will be here, and you hope that he has a healthy season. He'll provide some offense for you. But the Mets might need to get a bat if Bichette opts in. And if Alvarez is on the team, they still might need a bat. If you let go of one of those guys, or dare I say both, I'm not sure where you go for offense in an offseason where the best offensive player available is Jazz Chisholm. So there's going to be more to this story as this story continues to unfold. I understand that. I understand the thought process, but I think the Mets would be very, very, very foolish to trade from one of their positions of strength, in this case, most notably catcher, to create a hole where one doesn't exist when they already have plenty of other holes on their roster. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. You know what I do. Before I hit record, I sit down, I pull open the Kalshi app, I take a look, and I like to see if I can find some value. I like to see if I can get a little creative with it. Sometimes it's just about finding the value, and I think the value here is a very simple one. Mets play the Kansas City Royals tonight. The Kansas City Royals are terrible. The Mets are terrible. We'll preview the series a little bit in the final segment, but the Mets winning the game is trading at 59 cents a share, which means $100 will get you $164 and change. I like the value there. The Mets have not announced the starting pitcher. Kodai Senga will get into this game at some point. Mets are facing Seth Lugo, former Met. We'll talk about that again in the final segment, but I just think there's good value here for the Mets picking up a win against the team that they should beat. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house, and as the probability changes, you can trade into and out of your position for a limited time. Download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10 Kalshi. Trade on anything, must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Now we have to talk about an individual and a topic that I did not want to talk about. I thought we could try to avoid, but unfortunately, here we are yet again. And it seems like this has been something that has marked this man's tenure with the Mets unfairly for the entire time that he has been a New York Met, and that is Francisco Lindor. So let me just get this out of the way right away. Francisco Lindor is a great player. Francisco Lindor has been a great Met. Francisco Lindor is a player that I wanted here, that I was excited when they traded for him. He is a player that I have never wavered in my support of, despite having a down first year like a lot of stars do when they come to New York. York or to the Mets specifically. He is not someone I've ever had any issues with on the field, off the field. I think he is a consummate professional. I think he handles himself well. I think Mets fans, by and large, don't realize how good they have it, and they probably won't at this point until he's retired, and then people will wear his jersey and they'll pretend as if they never hated on him. But the man gets so much unnecessary hate and so much unnecessary flack. I honestly cannot fathom it. And I cannot stand it. The guy is great. He does everything that you would like out of a star player. And yet somehow, every once in a while, when the team falters, he is the first person that is picked on, despite the fact that you saw this season what a Mets team without Francisco Lindor looks like. Because if Francisco Lindor doesn't miss 2 months, I'm not sure if the Mets are as buried as they were. I'm really not. Now, I don't think one player changes everything, but he is the captain of this defense. He is a stalwart in the middle of the field. He is a guy who provides tremendous offense. He's had 2 30-30 seasons. He's averaged 25 home runs and 25 stolen bases as a Met. Like, I don't know what else you would want from this guy. So let me just say this, even though Steve Cohen said it, Lindor is not getting traded. Lindor should not be traded. And quite frankly, I don't know which one of those things is dumber. If you think that he should be traded, it's dumb. If you think that he will be traded, it's dumb. He's not going to be traded. Again, he is the second best player on the New York Mets. We just talked about it a little bit with Francisco Alvarez. Where would the Mets be without Francisco Lindor? Where could the Mets go in 2027 without Francisco Lindor? The Mets don't have a shortstop of the future. I just want you to know that. The Mets had some shortstop depth, and they chose to move on from it, and I understand why, and I agree with it. But Luis Angel Acuna was the next guy. He's never going to hit. They traded him. Jet Williams, maybe he hits, maybe he doesn't. He's not hitting right now. He's not looked good in AAA for the Brewers, but they traded him. Mauricio is still here. He's not a shortstop long-term. It just is what it is. And he may never hit. The Mets have 2 guys in Asigan and Elian Pena specifically who might be shortstop. They're shortstops now. They might be shortstops in the future. They are years away. So I'm not sure where you're going to just find a shortstop that grows on trees and makes this guy, and you can just plug into your team and have him be the second best player and have him replace Francisco Lindor. You're not going to find that guy. 25 and 25 average, 2 seasons of 30-30, and he just narrowly missed another 30-30 season. I don't know what you guys think you're going to get if you move on from Francisco Lindor. You know what you're going to get? Somebody a lot worse. So he should not be traded. He should not be traded, full stop. And practically speaking, he really can't be traded. First of all, he has a full no-trade clause. Second of all, he makes a lot of money. And there are only like 4 teams in Major League Baseball that can afford Francisco Lindor's contract. The Mets are already one of them. So I don't know what kind of great value you think you're going to get shopping this guy around. And I understand people are going to go, well, you know, the 2 of the other teams that could use a shortstop that are good are the Dodgers and the Yankees. You could trade him to one of those teams. Stop it. Stop. It's nonsense. No, it's not happening. Francisco Lindor is probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. He's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame wearing a Mets cap. Well, if he goes to the Hall of Fame, he's going to go to the Hall of Fame wearing a Mets cap because he's going to spend the bulk of his career here. So I don't understand why you're in such a quick hurry to get rid of guys like this. And then, you know, in my mentions on Twitter, people say, oh, well, you know, the Mets aren't going to be good again until he's 35 and he's not even a shortstop. I mean, stop it. There's so much presumption in these thought processes. Now, look, will the Mets be good in 2027? I hope so. I don't know. I understand that. I don't know and you don't know. But you don't know that they're going to be bad either. And again, where are they going for a shortstop? Francisco Lindor is not only the second best player on the team, he's the best shortstop the Mets have ever had. And that's another thing that I've argued with people on Mets Twitter the last couple days over, no, he's not the best. It's Jose Reyes. It's not Jose Reyes. Jose Reyes was a good player who had an amazing peak. It's not Jose Reyes. And I've got some numbers for you. And this is courtesy of my buddy Carson over at Mets Weekly. Lindor as a Met, 3,478 plate appearances with a 799 OPS, 158 home runs, 454 RBI, and a 122 weighted runs created plus. He has accumulated over 30 WAR as a Met. Jose Reyes as a Met, 5,931 plate appearances. So almost double, not quite double, but a lot more. He has a 768 OPS, so less there. Good, but less. Also different kinds of players, I understand that. He has 108 home runs. Again, different kinds of players, but less. 521 RBI. So he has more RBI, but he's done it in like 2,000 plus more plate appearances. His weighted runs created plus is 104, significantly less than the 122. And he accumulated 27.9 WAR, less than Francisco Lindor. And this is a guy whose peak was arguably better, flashier. And Francisco Lindor is a guy who came to the Mets as his prime was about to hit. Reyes was a guy who came up super early, relied on athleticism, and was here through the best years of his career. And yet somehow you look down and you realize that Francisco Lindor has just been better. Despite the injuries, despite the thumbs down, which some of you are still upset about, despite whatever nonsense you might want to bring up to try to justify why he's not good. And then you look up and you realize, wait, he's actually really good. He's actually really, really good. And the Mets are lucky to have him. If your thought process on Francisco Lindor is anything other than he is really good and the Mets are lucky to have him, you are wrong. It's just what it is. You don't want to hear it, and that's fine, but you're wrong. Just know that you're wrong, because Lindor is great. Objectively, a great player. And I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to have this conversation, but we will put it to bed right there. Finally, Mets open a series, 3-game set, interleague play against the Kansas City Royals. The Kansas City Royals are terrible. The Mets are also terrible. The Kansas City Royals right now, I believe, are the only team that has a worse record than the New York Mets, which is fascinating. The New York Mets are 38-53. The Kansas City Royals are 37-54. Losing this series would be bad. I understand that the Mets are not a good team. I understand that the Royals are likewise not a good team. You are what you say you are, right? You are what we thought they were. You are what your record says you are. Sure. But the Mets on paper should beat the Kansas City Royals. This game is in New York. Mets have home field advantage for whatever that's worth in Major League Baseball. Mets have, I know Bobby Witt Jr. is a star, but you've got people, and they do. The Royals have some really good players, but the Mets should win this series. I mean, let's be honest. The Mets should win this series. I really don't want to do shows this week where I have to talk about the Mets losing to the Kansas City Royals. So if from nothing else than a selfish standpoint, I really hope the Mets get out of their own way and win this series easily. And maybe they sweep this series. You should. Now, the pitching is weird. Seth Lugo, former Met versus TBD. As of this morning, the Mets have not yet announced a starter. It seems like it's going to be either a bullpen game or it'll be Kodai Senga with an opener. Seth Lugo's been okay. Again, when you look at teams like the Royals or the Mets, you're obviously not going to find too many pitchers who have been excellent when a team is this bad. He's 3-6 with a 4.20 ERA. But he's facing, the Mets, who he felt spurned by, so I'm sure he'll come out tonight and he will absolutely shove. Then tomorrow you have a flip. It's TBD for the Royals versus Christian Scott. Christian Scott has been good in his 2 starts since coming back from the IL. Not great, but again, he's building back up. It's clear that they're being a little careful with him, especially after not pitching in a year and a half. And in the final game of the series, another former Met, Michael Wacha, taking on Sean Manaea. Michael Wacha, 5-6 with a 3.45 ERA. Michael Wacha looked like a guy when he was on the Mets all those years ago, looked like a guy who was going to be out of baseball. Credit to him. He has bounced back in a major way. He has been really good. He's just changed the way he's pitched, and he's been able to, continue and extend his career. So that's another game that's odd to me. And when you look at these matchups, you could see where the Mets would lose these games. You could. I think for everything I said, all the bluster and all the bravado at the top of the segment, honestly, again, this is another one of those series where if you told me the Mets lost 2 out of 3, I believe you. If the Mets took 2 out of 3, I believe you. If you told me the Mets beat Seth Lugo but lost to Michael Wacha, I'd believe you. If you told me the Mets, only won the middle game of the series and the 2 former Mets, Wacha and Lugo, beat them, I'd believe you. If you told me the Mets swept, I believe you. The Mets got swept, I believe you. So I think this is another one of those things because of how unpredictable or unpredictably bad this season has gone. It's very hard to forecast individual matchups and individual series even because, again, the Mets are only 1 game better than the Kansas City Royals. So how can I sit here and say the Mets need to win these games? So I don't think the Mets need to win them because I don't think the record matters, but the Mets should still win. But we've been let down before. The Colorado Rockies came in and swept the New York Mets. So, it could happen. The Mets could lose this series. I don't want it to. And maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm just sort of dragging my will and my want to along because the Mets should win. And I just don't want to hit record tomorrow and sit down and talk to you guys about a loss to a Seth Lugo-led Kansas City Royals team for the New York Mets. So just for no other reason, just for vibes, guys. Just for vibes here. I hope I am right. And I hope that the Mets can start off this homestand on the right foot. And after this series with Kansas City, they've got another series that, maybe looks a little trickier now that Boston has kind of been on the uptick. But it's another series that the Mets could and should win. So we'll see. We'll see what happens heading into the All-Star break. Mets have 6 more games, 3 versus Kansas City, 3 versus Boston, all at home before the halfway mark of the season, before the All-Star game rolls around. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. I'm John Saponaro. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, we would love to get to 5,000 in short order. But more importantly, we would love for you to be a part of that journey. Until next time, see you tomorrow.